Dead by Daylight's current meta is the most boring experience I've had with the game since I started playing during the release of the Silent Hill chapter back in 2020. The issue with the meta lies within 3 killer perks: Eruption from Nemesis, Colubrine from Sawako, and Overcharge from Doctor. These perks all share the same issue: low risk for high reward. There is no risk to kicking a generator for killers to apply these perks. Add in the fact the perks are applied until a survivor touches the gen or is down, and you get a build that makes games last far longer than necessary. Of course, we did not reach this point in the meta without changes to prior perks. When I first joined the game, there were 2 perks that owned the meta for gen slowdown: Pop Goes the Weasel from Clown, and Hex Ruin from Hag. Back in 2020, Pop activated for 60 seconds after you hooked a survivor. During this time, if you kicked a gen, it instantly regressed by 25%. This was also when gens were still 80 seconds instead of the 90 we have today. Pop was then nerfed to only 45 seconds due to, as the devs said, 60 seconds let the killer have too much time to use the perk. As meta is stale, complaints kept rising from both sides. The devs nerfed Pop again to only apply minus 20% of the gen's current progress, meaning the 25% we would have gotten before only applied to when the gen is 95% to 99% completed. Ruin went through much the same. Ruin used to apply to a hex until it was cleansed, and made gens automatically regress by 200% when a survivor let go. Ruin was butchered earlier in 2022 to only make gens regress by 100% base speed when a survivor let go, and also disables when a survivor dies or when it is cleansed, making it to where when the perk is actually useful on most killers in a 3 gen, not matter because a survivor should be dead by that point. Ruin was also combined with the old version of Hex Undying. It let other hexes stay up until either Undying was cleansed, or all other 4 totems were cleansed of Ruin. Undying was quickly nerfed to only let totems be saved once, and also start to keep tokens from totems such as Devour, which I never understood the complaints about nerfing Undying when it first released. There are now 10 perks plus 2 items that you can bring to do bones faster and get a benefit for. At the time of Undying, there were only 3 perks, which makes it slightly more understandable, but it is quite clear at this point that behavior assumed the original version of Undying would have become meta and they wouldn't have changed it as much. I feel as if Undying stayed the same, the meta would have swapped before they did the massive perk changes in the semi-recent mid-chapter, or at least survivors would run a perk slot for Antibone perks. So what is different to me about this meta compared to the new meta? The risk of Pop and Ruin made the perks feel counterable from a survivor point of view. To counter Pop, you did multiple gens at once, or were good enough at looping to limit the usage of Pop until most of the pallets were gone for late game. There was also the added benefit of Pop only being able to be used 12 times per match, with the 12th time not mattering, because all the survivors would be dead. Ruin was easily countered by doing totems, memorizing their spots, or by bringing perks or a map to find the totems faster, with small game being one of the best ways to find totems, being a general perk to find in every survivor blood web without leveling any prior survivor. The newer perks do not have sufficient counterplay for how much value you earn for running them. As far as I'm aware, there are 2 options: either do gens faster to not let the killer kick them, or run Repressed Alliance from Cheryl, who is locked to Oryx cells and forces you to get lucky with the shrine or buy the DLC. I am aware that 2 of the killer perks I'm complaining about are also locked to DLC and only purchasable with Oryx cells. However, due to it being a 4v1 game, I feel as though 2 meta perks that every killer running is much more of an issue than the 1 perk that not everyone bought, because none of Cheryl perks are exactly that good. The newer perks also provide information to the killer. Eruption makes survivors scream whenever you down someone, while also not letting them do basically anything for 25 seconds. Colubrine tells you what gen survivors are on if they hit a good skill check for 60 seconds after kicking the gen. And Overcharge gives the survivors a skill check to hit when they touch the gen. The numbers for Dead by Daylight out on Steam are suffering as well from this meta as people grow tired of it. Minus 3,000 players on Steam alone, even with the release of the new Night chapter this month, which, side note, shadow buffed Eruption with a hopeful bug that after you scream and let go, the gens keep regressing instead of stopping for the 25 seconds. So how can we make the meta better? I'd suggest rebuffing Pop and Ruin to what they once were. Let Ruin keep the when a survivor is sacrificed, Ruin automatically turns off. Could even buff the perk to 300% regression to make the totem necessary instead of just pushing through it, and encourage Antibone perks again, especially since we now have 10 of them. For the current meta, nerf Eruption, Colubrine, and Overcharge only work on 1 gen each, to make them still good for 3 gens, but still less useful for early to mid game. If you want to tackle the perks individually, then make Eruption's incapacitated effect only last for 10 to 12 seconds. Colubrine should be nerfed to 150% or remove the information part of the perk, and Overcharge should also remove the information part of the perk, or buff the regression to start at 100% while removing the skill check. Otherwise, that's it. More of a rant video about the current state of killer meta and why I hate it so much, and why it sucks. Cheers.